I'm Anna Cody. I'm the Director of Kingsford Legal Centre and an Associate Professor at the University of New South Wales. I thought it might be helpful to define clinical legal education, as I've principally been asked to talk about that, as well as a little bit about developments into the future. So clinical legal education is a methodology for teaching law to law students, and they learn about what the law says, how the legal system functions by practicing law and critiquing it, analysing it and reflecting on their role within law and their contribution to achieving justice. There was a project which developed best practices for Australia in clinical legal education, and the best practices report, of which I was a part, states that clinical legal education is a significant experiential method of learning and teaching. Clinical legal education places law students in close contact with the realities, demands and compromises of legal practice, and in so doing it provides students with real life reference points for learning the law. It also invites students to see the wider context and everyday realities of accessing an imperfect legal system. Clinical pedagogy involves a system of self-critique and supervisory feedback so that law students may learn how to learn from their experiences of legal environments, observation and, at its most effective level, personal responsibility for clients and their legal problem. So, in summary, a learning methodology for law students that compels them through a constant reality check to integrate their learning of substantive law with the justice system or otherwise and its practical operation. An example of clinical legal education in operation would be a student working on, for example, an anti-discrimination law case. So the student has to read the Racial Discrimination Act in order to understand the case being made. So in doing so, learns substantive law. What does the law say? The student then must meet with the client, develop interviewing and interpersonal skills, potentially attend a conciliation, prepare legal submissions, and experience how dispute resolution works in practice and some of the theory in preparing for that, in developing conciliation presentations. So the student develops a range of skills through that. I was asked to look at some of the challenges for the next 20 years. I think that certainly there is a reduction in the big firm work and employment of law graduates, while also an increase in demand for broken down legal work, so piecework of legal work. I also think that reducing funding for legal assistance services and the legal assistance sector from government is a real challenge that we're going to be dealing with. There is a greater use of technology. I think we're going to be less bound by office or the concept of office as a physical space. There's also, as one of the previous speakers talked about, internationalisation. I think that as well that the graduates of the future will certainly be needing to develop in all of those areas. But I think some of the key things that clinical legal education teaches students and law schools teach students will also be needed in the next 20 years. That's teamwork, being able to work with other people. I think that's always going to be required. We are people, we're humans, we're going to work together, we're going to live together, and we're going to have to work out how to do that effectively. Critical minds, being able to look at a situation, analyse it and come up with solutions. I think that as well will continue into the future. Being able to analyse the law as well will continue. Being flexible, I think, is also another key skill that clinical legal education teaches and will need to continue to teach. And reflective skills. I think that's one of the key things that we all need in life, but particularly lawyers, how to learn from what we're experiencing so that we don't keep repeating the same mistakes, so that we can actually develop and grow in our work. And I think that ability to learn from what we do each day is a key skill that we have to be able to teach students as well. Do you want me to move on to how clinical legal education is integrated into the degree at UNSW, or do you want to have a chance to ask questions?
If you could do that in the context of perhaps some of the questions that we ask. Are the courses that you offer electives?
No, they're not all electives. So some students have to participate. Our first year Indigenous students at UNSW also participate in a clinical subject in their first year, learning about the legal aid system and also interviewing skills. And our ethics students, so lawyers, ethics and justice course, all students come and have a clinical component at Kingsford Legal Centre where they learn the theory of interviewing as well as an overview of the legal aid system, and then they get the chance to actually meet with clients and interview them and reflect on that process. So we're teaching them both the interviewing skills as well as beginning that reflective learning process.
So I'm trying to get a handle on how many of your undergraduates at the university doing a law degree would end up at some stage during that degree having the experience of undertaking a course at Redfern Legal Centre.
At Kingsford Legal Centre.
Yes, sorry, at Kingsford
but we
Legal
do actually offer two courses as well at Redfern Legal
yep.
Centre. So I'm not sure of the exact percentage, but I think it's around 60% would choose to do some clinical course, and we're including within that internships within that, so that there is a range of opportunities for students. So as well as elective courses at Kingsford Legal Centre in employment law, in family law and community law, at Redfern Legal Centre in housing law, administrative law and police powers. We also have internships at places like the Football Federation, Choice Australia, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, at the DPP, so that they get a broad range, picking up some of your points about the in-house counsel and government departments as well.
How are they being supervised?
They get a range of supervision, so they have on-site supervision. Then they also have classes, so that it's not just practice, it's not PLT, it's actually an opportunity for them to learn from their experience. So every 2 weeks there's a 2-hour class as well for those internship processes, and then there's assessment process.
One thing I did when I was a young practitioner, not by choice, was I went and interviewed somebody in a jail, and it was it's really stuck with me because something that I always remember, and they basically pushed me in the room and said, "Here, have a rape alarm." And I was in a room with a man that was quite frightening. Do you put the students into jail environments to learn?
We do. At Kingsford Legal Centre, we have Long Bay Jail in our catchment area, so we go out, generally not the students on their own, we would generally accompany them and provide a little bit more support than that.
This is a long time ago.
Yeah. But it is a really powerful experience.
Yes, very much so.
The clanging doors, the keys, the checks, the taking earrings off, all of that whole process is a really huge learning experience.
Put me off criminal law very quickly.
You mentioned the impact of funding on the work that you're doing. How much of the work you do is funded by the university, and how much is funded by the government, state and federal?
Around 60% of our funding comes from the university, and around 40% comes from government sources, so state and federal government. But as you know, community legal centres are facing a funding cut, so that will shift from July 2017. That proportion will shift.
That's a federal government funding cut.
It is.
It is. And what impact do you think that will have on the services that you provide?
It will reduce the services that we provide. We will have to cut 1.5 positions.
So
There's
where
no
will
two ways
people get
around
that
it.
assistance from?
They'll either not get any assistance, and that'll have its own costs. Legal aid doesn't have the capacity to pick up those clients, so they'll go without service.
Yeah.
How do you test the value of the education that you provide for undergraduates in terms of outcomes? In other words, why should clinical legal education be offered rather than sticking to the Priestley 11 or other core subjects?
I think it's both. I think that clinical legal education is one of the methodologies for teaching law, which is an effective form. The evidence that we have for showing that it works, I'm at the moment doing some research on the impact of that clinical component within the ethics course, and it shows at the moment that they get a much more textured and deeper understanding of what are ethical issues, for example, that rather than before having the clinical component, some of the students reply that they are expecting repugnant clients as the experience of ethics. Only, some tiny percentage afterwards actually come up with that as the ethical experience that they had. They talk about things of communication, working with family members within an interviewing situation, who's giving instructions. So it's much more layered, much more textured, deeper understanding of what an ethical issue actually looks like in practice. Also when we talk to some of the solicitors that we then place or that students then find employment with, some of the firms as well as the suburban law firms, they talk about the difference that they see in the students that have had a clinical course. So I guess it's more a qualitative rather than actually having hard evidence at this point.
Thank you. Well,
When we look at clinical education, I guess the demand for that has come from a number of directions. So students want to do it, employers, want people that have done it, and from a university perspective, it's a great way to assist with access to justice. But I just wonder whether, having got all these great offerings, whether there's then a need for universities to go further and offer the practical legal training, rather than see that as being something that occurs later. Because it seems to me that if you're doing the course, learning the substantive law, and you've got the experiential experience, then the practical learning training to me seems to sit into the middle of those, whilst at present it seems to come at the end.
I think that there'd be scope to integrate that, and I know that you're hearing from the Newcastle University Dean a little bit later, and I'm sure she'll talk about that. I think it would have to shift the way we would think about perhaps practical legal training and the way we would shape it. I think that there's definitely space to integrate that throughout some of the courses that we teach substantively rather than having it tacked on at the end. I think that would be an appropriate and effective way of teaching law, because I think otherwise, unless there's some other clinical experience, I think students are they're prepared in one way but not in many others for actually seeing clients and dealing with legal practice.
where do you see legal services and legal profession in 15 to 20 years' time?
Those skills that I talked about, I think that they're still going to be there. I also think I have great optimism and confidence in humanity. I think it is a great profession, the legal profession. I see volunteer lawyers coming in week after week, giving of their time. So I am very confident that will continue. I think that lawyers do have a sense of responsibility for access to justice and improving our system. And I think that will continue as well. It may express itself in slightly different forms, but I think that will be in 20 years' time as well. I think that there will be increasing internationalisation, and in some ways the joining up of firms has really pushed that further forward as well. And I think that law schools are certainly responding to a real demand in law students for having those international experiences. And there isn't that lack of, we are very much a connected world with the internet and various forms of communication that we now have. So I'm sure the basics will be there, but it will look a bit different. In the same way, if we looked back 20 years, it would look different.
Can I ask your comments, not quite on legal education, but working at Kingsford as you do, is there an unmet need for legal services, and is it growing? And are we just talking about those who are perhaps homeless, or are there others within the community who would need legal advice and legal assistance, Middle Australia, and would they be coming to Kingsford Legal Centre to seek advice as well?
I think that there is a growing unmet legal need, and I think the Productivity Commission's report demonstrated that, particularly in civil law services. What we see is certainly we can provide initial advice. That's part of our mandate, is we provide initial advice to everybody, but the casework that we can take on is very much limited to no income or very low income people, and that's absolutely the case with Legal Aid Commission as well. So I think that yes, there is unmet legal need. I think that the Law and Justice Foundation's research as well into the demand on doctors, that's where people go when they've got a problem. They often go and see their doctor. They don't recognise it as a legal problem. So I think that's probably going to grow as well. And perhaps that's another development that we should certainly see growing, is that growth in health justice partnerships and that connectedness and that wraparound type of service within legal assistance. So yes, it's growing, unmet legal need, and I think that it's getting more and more constricted to lower and lower income people.
Because of the dollars, because of funding.
Absolutely. And as you would be aware, the Public Purpose Fund is another shrinking pool which has been used to support the legal assistance sector, and that's also going to be another pressure.
So how is that legal need going to be met with all of the pressures that are on resources?
I think we'll probably end up seeing greater unrepresented litigants. So the costs will be borne. It's not that the costs will go away. They'll just be borne in different sections of the justice system. So we'll get more pressure on courts. Local courts will become more and more clogged, as well as district court and family courts and the magistrate courts. So I think that there will be greater pressure. There will be a greater sense of alienation from people who can't get the information that they need at an early stage and get the help that they need at an early stage. Increasing incarceration as well, rather than stepping in at an earlier point to prevent that from happening. So that's the potential.
And do you see an opportunity there for advances in the technological space to assist with that, or is it more human-based? Is it we need more lawyers, we need more money? Like, is there?
I think there is some scope for some legal information to be given through technology, but I also know, the law access model is a fantastic model. It's people copy it or try and copy it throughout the world, really. So, and that's people-based. It's both. It's a nice combination of technology, a great database that's constantly updated with up-to-date, relevant information. But there's people on the front end of it. They're the people on the end of the phone. So, it's that combination of the two rather than one or the other.
And a computer, I suppose, can't talk and can't explain for a different person that you're speaking to it.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
Michael?
I just wanted to ask, in relation to clinical education, and I'd include the internships here, are there opportunities for cross-disciplinary opportunities for the law students to work with people from other areas of expertise?
Yes, absolutely. And that's always been a part of the model of community legal centres, is that we work in a cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary mode. And health justice partnerships are definitely a part of that, working with social workers, with doctors, with nurses, with midwives. That's definitely a part of it. And I think across other disciplines, at Monash University, for example, there's a great example of business, law and social work doing a combined approach to clients coming in. They problem solve together, 3 students, 3 supervisors, to deal with the whole issue that a client's facing and come up with a response. So definitely across various sectors there's room for that.